I can't imagine a better way to spend the next half hour or so than listening to the Queen of Networking tell us about networking. And I would remind everyone who hasn't heard this 6 times already that Kate's session on networking at the ISPA show was voted the most popular single contribution at the show. And with very good reason. So without any further ado, I'm delighted to hand over to Kate. Let's hear it, Kate.
Thank you. Right, I'll share my screen now. Okay. Right. We are being recorded, so if you wouldn't mind looking really enthusiastic as we go through, there will be some interaction and some questions at the end, if that's okay with everybody. If you want to record your questions in the chat, that's absolutely fine, but I won't have a chance to really look at the chat because, you know, so if something goes dramatically wrong, please wave at me. So I want you to imagine that, she says, hopefully that this will go behave itself. Come on, behave yourself, thank you. I want you to imagine you've met a business person at a meeting somewhere and they turn to you and say, I've been told I must go networking. What advice do you have? And I think each of us would have different sorts of advice, but I think this is probably a little vague as a question. So I'm going to give the person a name. I'm going to talk about Evadne. She's a newly appointed business development executive, what in my day we called a salesperson. She's been told she must go networking. Okay, but you might also have met with Hubert. Hubert is a successful local business owner, and he's been told he needs to get out more, meet some people. Let's see what advice we might give the two of them and whether or not it will be different or the same for both of them. So I would think that they're going to start by having some questions. And one of the first questions I certainly had when I started was, what is networking? And particularly if you've been told you must go networking, why? Why should I do it? And then, of course, how do I choose which groups or events? Because, you know, you can't open a screen these days without something coming up as a different networking. How do you choose between them? Then, when you're looking at them, how do you prepare beforehand? Prior preparation prevents poor performance. How do you behave during the meeting? And how and why should you follow up? So I'm just going to take these questions in turn, if everybody's okay with that. So my definition of networking, and this isn't one I've ever seen anywhere, but it's my definition, okay, is when I want to ask what is networking, I say networking is meeting in order to meet, which sounds a bit odd, but what I mean is you're not turning up to hear somebody talk about a particular topic. The coffee you have beforehand when you're mingling with other people is networking, but your principal reason in those cases is to go and hear somebody talk. I think in networking, the meeting itself is the end goal, and the purpose there is to build close, dependable working relationships. But then the question is to do what? What's your ultimate goal? You know, is it just to, and unfortunately, this is where a lot of people get it wrong. Is it just to make sure that you know a lot of people, or are you trying to achieve something? And I have to say, every piece of advice you get should be against the litmus paper of the why. Everything depends on the why. So I think there's two main whys. One is social and one is commercial. And I'd like to explore the differences. In social networking, it could include things like getting out and meeting people. Sometimes I think we forget how important it is to connect. And I think one of the things that COVID-19 has done for us has given us an enormous great slap and told us that actually, even if sometimes we don't like people, it's not you know, much of the time we do need to get out and meet people. We are social creatures. We need to connect. Sometimes we want help and support from other people. Sometimes, and we just heard this morning, sometimes you just need to be able to talk to somebody else who may be in the same boat. Just talk about something, just to feel connected to them. Sometimes talking in your peer group, you know, there's Hubert, he's got staff, and whenever he talks to his staff, he's got to remember that he's the boss. When you're in a peer group, in your network, talking to other business owners, it's a different dynamic. And of course, it reaffirms your position in the business community. People who are networking for social reasons, for them, this is the principal reason. It's almost a mental health issue. That's why they go networking, and any business they get out of it is a bonus. There are other people, though, who network for commercial reasons, really focused commercial reasons. So getting business from other attendees, getting referrals to their contacts, getting reliable suppliers, getting suitable collaborators. I mean, for example, you know, the people often forget that you know, they think about just selling to people in the room. What you really want to know is, who do they know? Who will they recommend me to? Now, I would like a show of hands, if I can get everybody to show on the, great, I think I've got everybody here, almost everybody here. I'd like a show of hands. How many of you, just take Evadne, she's been told, you know, she's business development, you've got to go out networking. Do you think how many of you think she's networking? Just put your hand up if you think she's networking for social reasons. How many of you think she's networking for commercial reasons? Hands up. Right, exactly. I think Evadne is clearly networking for commercial reasons. So her reasons are going to be really hard-nosed. Let's say that Hubert is, just so that we have the contrast, Hubert is networking for social reasons, and certainly the way he's talked to us about it, the social reasons sound as though that's the reason he's doing it, because it might be different. So the first thing is that, you know, we've worked out why we're networking, and now we need to work out which groups or events we're going to. But we do that against the litmus paper of the reason we're going. This is networking with purpose. An awful lot of people, for them, there's only one purpose, and that is commercial. So all the advice you'll get will be on commercial. But I think people underplay the social connection. So let's have a look at which groups. She says, attempting to get a oh yes, I should have mentioned this. Under commercial, people say, why do I need to build a network, you know, build relationships with people if I'm doing it for commercial reasons? It's because people buy from people they know, like, and trust. You don't want to place an order with somebody you don't trust. If you've never met them, why should you trust them? Building up a rapport with somebody, you're more likely to get referrals. Why should I refer you to my mother or my best client if I don't trust you? You're more likely to get business directly. So let's have a look at which groups. And this is where it becomes really important. The groups and the events you go to do depend on whether or not you are social or commercial. Because if you're networking for social reasons, you need to find a group with the right people. For commercial reasons, it's the right businesses. So in this case, Hubert is looking for like-minded people. He might find those at Stow Chamber, but he also might find it at Stowmarket Golf Club. But Evadne, on the other hand, will definitely want to be looking for something that has the right businesses or the right kind of businesses that's going to allow her to become a success. And this is where you have a really important point to make, which are, who are the right businesses for her? And this is where I passionately believe, and I know Kim does as well, you have to do your marketing first. You have to have your marketing plan. What kind of business are you looking for? Who's going to be an ideal referral? We've all got stories about somebody who we had absolutely no idea was a good connection, and they come out with a connection for us. Wonderful. You know, I live next door to this person. I'm somebody's brother-in-law, you know. But the vast majority of things, it comes from being planned. And therefore, if you are, for example, a florist, the kind of businesses you might be looking for are not other florists, because that's not, you know, that's a different sort of networking. If you're networking for commercial reasons, you'd be looking for people like people who organize weddings, people who organize events, people who organize funerals. So these are the kind of people you'd be looking for. In both of those cases, though, you are looking for building relationships. Because whether you're looking for social support and the kind of people you can just go and have a coffee with when you're feeling down, or you're actually looking for business, it's all about relationships. And that takes time. And it also takes consistency. I have lost track of the number of people, when I say, do you go networking? They say, I tried it once and it wasn't successful. You can't try it once. Building relationships takes time and consistency. And one of the often quoted things is that showing up is 80% of the success. And I've seen that attributed to loads of different people, but everybody agrees that it's a good thing to remember. Okay, so we now know if we're networking for social reasons, we've got certain people to look for. If we've got commercial reasons, we've got other people to look for. But there's also the question of what kind of meetings we go to. So, how often can we meet? I would think if Adney could quite happily, she's in sales, go to a weekly meeting. Hubert probably would find a weekly meeting a bit of a chore. But I can't tell you. You have to decide for yourself. Everybody has to decide for themselves the frequency of the meeting. How often can they turn up? The next thing is to look at is time of day. And this is the point where I say, whatever you're networking for, you need to get something back. So even if you're networking for commercial reasons, if you are an owl, booking to go to a breakfast meeting is probably not sensible. You won't be firing all cylinders at ghastly o'clock in the morning. If, on the other hand, like me, you're a lark, booking on something that occurs late at night is probably a no-no. So you need to think about what kind of day. There are networking at breakfast, mid-morning, lunchtimes, afternoons, and evenings. You'll find something that will suit you, but you need to be able to take advantage of it, which means that you need to be able to perform during that time. And then we have a very interesting question about open and closed. If you're networking just for social reasons, you know, this doesn't really apply. But if you're networking for commercial reasons, how do you feel about having somebody else who does what you do in the room? Some people don't feel at all happy about that, and therefore they go for the lockdown. So closed versus open, you've got the lockdown, the lockout, only one in a room. You get the ones where it's a members only group where you're usually allowed to visit, and some where there's membership available, but it's open. And there's some with don't even bother having a membership. So for an example, just starting from the bottom, no membership, mentor coffee mornings, that you can't, there's no membership, you just turn up. Whereas the Stow Chamber coffee mornings, well, we offer membership if people want, but we're happy for visitors to turn up and never ever join. Members only, an example of that is Suffolk Chamber, that they allow you to visit as a visitor twice, and then they ask you to make a decision about joining. But you know, when you become a member, there's no lockout. You could be an underwater basket weaver and sit next at a table to somebody else who also does underwater basket weaving, and that's just it. If you go for the full lockout, then that is the point where there will only be one in the room. So one of the classics of the lockout is Business Network International. They meet weekly, they operate a lockout, they're very strict on the visits. That can be really, really useful if you're a commercial networker. If you're going solely for the commercial reasons, but it's not at all appropriate if you're going there for social reasons, even though you would make social relationships with those people. So I wouldn't, for example, recommend BNI to Hubert, and it might be appropriate to Evadne if everything else is right for her. And then, of course, let's not forget that there are different sorts of events that these people run. Some events are totally free format, like the coffee mornings. You turn up when you want to, you go when you want to. You talk to whoever you want to. It's not prescribed. You probably don't need to actually announce what you do to the whole group. And for some people, they really like that. Other people, they prefer a bit more structure. I have to say I do. There's some sort of formality, typically an elevator pitch. This idea of the elevator pitch, for completeness, it's the idea you get into an elevator with somebody and they say, what do you do? And you have between the start and the finish of the journey to describe what you do, which isn't very long. Stowe Chamber breakfasts, we have a chance to stand up and say what we do and what we're looking for, but it's not very structured. There are other things which are very, very much more structured. And then there are, I will have to say to you, there are some, because networking is a big buzzword, but some events are billed as networking, but it's actually there, you're going there to hear somebody speak. The networking is also secondary, which is fine, and you have to make up your own mind on what you want. If the idea of making lots of small talk fills you with horror, don't go to the Stowe Chamber coffee mornings. If the idea of standing up and speaking in public to a group of people, even albeit a small group, fills you with horror, don't go to the breakfasts. You have to decide what suits you. And just before I finish this second thing about making decisions about which groups to join, there is this question of membership. And people often wonder, is the membership worth it or not? So I thought it was just, let's take a moment to explore that. Because membership is a cost. But membership is not just a cost in money, it's also the investment of time. And you need to think about that. Unfortunately, an awful lot of people, because of this, people don't grasp the idea of consistency. And you're seeing it particularly now on Zoom. People are attending everything. But that's a scattergun approach. It doesn't help. I mean, it might be nice to, as it were, get out and meet people, but that's all. If you really want, you're making an investment in something which could even just be the people you can talk to when you're feeling down. That's still an investment, and you need to look at your return on that investment. You're better off choosing a small number and targeting those. But if you are looking about money, please remember that when you start, yes, there's an annual membership fee, but you also have to pay meeting fees and quite often VAT. And for small businesses, that can be a killer. You know, you may be able to justify £250, but not 300. So just remember when you get a quote that you have to look at all of these. Whether it's a good return for you, I don't know. It depends how many sales you want to make and all the rest of it, if on the commercial side. And in terms of Hubert, it depends on how happy he feels investing money in his own well-being. Probably quite happy so long as you don't actually put it in those terms. Now, preparing for the meeting, you're going to go to this meeting, and prior preparation prevents poor performance. I must prepare. What does that mean? My thanks to James Davey for the Sales Masters Guild. He's given me his list for preparation. And I'm going to just go through these, and then we'll have a conversation about which apply to Evadne and which apply to Hubert. Why are you going to this meeting? What's the purpose? And nothing, I don't mean as vague as networking. Is there somebody you're trying to meet? Are you trying to raise the profile of your offering? Are you just trying to get back into things after COVID-19? Whatever. That you have a reason for going. What is that reason? That should be your touchstone. Quite often you will get an advanced list of guests. And if you have a look at those. Look at the guests and choose who you want to speak to, because otherwise, you know, you leave and think, oh, I wanted to speak to, you know, there was Mike Bernard there and I really wanted to chat to him, and I completely forgot because I spent all my time talking to Stephen Stoddard. So you need to think about that. Turn up early, because it's in the early stages. There's fewer people, and you have more chance to choose the people you want to talk to, and more time to talk to people. Look and sound your best. It is amazing to me, but I've had to remind a few people on Zoom that combing their hair might be a good idea. I know we've all had difficulties with our hair until recently, but you know, sometimes you just need to remember that. Look and sound your best. Put a brave face on it if you're going through a bad time. Carry your business cards and prepare your story. And your story simply answers the question, you know, what do you do? We'll look at the preparing your story as a topic in a second. I just want to say that obviously this whole thing, to me, is designed for the people who are going commercial networking. I'd be interested in your views. Which of these do you think apply to the social networkers? So do you think, hands up those of you who think that why we're going to the meeting applies to the social networkers? Yeah, few hands. What about getting advanced list of guests? Social networkers? Not sure. Researching guests and working out who you want to speak to, is that appropriate if it's just social? Yeah, could be, could be. What about turning up early? Yeah, lots of hands. I think that's worth it. Looking and sounding your best? Yeah, if you turn up looking like the dog dragged you in, you probably won't get much social interaction either. What about carrying your business cards and telling your story? I think it's probably worth doing that, you know, because even if it's social, because with the social people like Hubert, there's nothing to say that they can't get business. You know, it's not illegal. Preparing your story. This is not about talking about doing a massive amount of work. It's talking about answering the question, and what do you do? So it's about the elevator pitch, your 60 seconds, as they often call it. You need to be able to answer it in a slightly more informal way if you're talking to somebody, as opposed to standing up and declaiming. If you stood up and declaimed, you would, you know, people might think that was a bit odd if it's social. And then think about what outcome you're looking for. People often think they're looking for a sale as a result of that presentation. I suggest that what you're looking for is somebody to say, that's interesting, tell me more. Because that's the point at which you're making contact. Again, going back to the slides presented to me by Sales Masters Guild, which I think are very useful looking at. You've got the who are you. By the way, even on an elevator pitch, people often forget to say their name, their business name, particularly when they're in a group when they know most people. And they also say, as you know, and completely ignore the fact that there's at least 2 visitors. So just a point for you. Your background, you know, I used to do this and I do this now, or whatever. It just provides some kind of a, you know, an idea of who you are. And the context is the kind of customers you work with and the kind of help you give them. Focus on the benefits. So it's not, you know, it's exactly as Mike Bernard does when he talks about people coming along and signing up to be a distributor. He doesn't talk about them being a distributor. He talks about them having the opportunity to earn some more money. So you're presenting this solution. If you're meeting with somebody one-to-one over a cup of coffee, and you go through this, you know, what do you do? And they go through this. You don't close with the strap line. Unless you say, and my strap line is, and make a bit of a laugh of it. That sounds a bit odd. If if you're doing it one-to-one, you probably want to just make a connection. I help people like you, that, you know, whatever. But the strapline really works when you're being a bit more formal. Again, obviously for commercial reasons, what do you think? How many of you think that you should do all of those for social reasons? Do you know, I agree with Steve that I think you should do it for social reasons as well. If somebody says, what do you do? And you sort of mumble a bit and nobody knows what you do, and they might actually want your services. You know, you don't have to sell to them, they want your services. Give them a chance, eh? So now let's talk about how you behave in the meeting. Because people ask me about this all the time. And my first piece of advice to Hubert and to Evadne, to everybody, is just go and speak to people. A lot of people turn up, and because when they were little they were told not to talk to strangers, they sit there like this. And actually, those are the people I look out for. Because if I see somebody standing there looking a bit uncertain, I go and talk to them, and you've got a friend for life. And you never know who they know. I mean, you know, it's fantastic. What do you say, Kate? Well, what do you do? How's COVID-19 affecting you? If all else fails, warm for the time of year, isn't it? The number of times I've started a conversation by remarking on the coffee. You're just breaking the ice. That's all you're doing. And then as you go through it, listen and respond and build common ground. So it's, you know, the people you know, you know, all the social stuff. At this stage, commercial is out. You're just building relationships. So it's all about social stuff. Just chat, and stay warm in your manner, but not effusive. You don't want to gush all over people. That would be my recommendation. You know, just remember you're human and stop trying to be on duty. The objective is to build relationships here. So we all know that the one thing that we've got in our armory, in our toolkit, is to be interested in other people. There's nothing like being interested in people for people to really respond to you. And remember, you don't know who they know. So even if you're really commercially focused, be careful. You could be talking to somebody who is the one person who could get you through to talk to somebody important. Now, you're trying to be interested in them. I find the best way is to keep thinking in my head, how can I help them? Is there somebody I could introduce them to? Is there somebody is there a piece of advice I could give them? If they're saying to me, oh, I'm having real difficulty doing this, is there something I can offer as a help? That's a great way of showing that the interest isn't just, you know, skin deep. You know, it's not just your eyebrows. You're actually interested with your mind. How can you help them? And at some point, hopefully, they will say to you, I've talked enough about myself. Tell me, introduce yourself. And you say, what do you do? And you tell them, because you've prepared your story. And you don't have to ramble because you prepared it, but you don't have to sound too glib either. As I say, the objective here is to build relationships. Please take this with the meaning I'm giving it. I'm not being cruel when I say people often hard sell. A lot of people are really enthusiastic about what they do, particularly small business people. I do this and I can do this, and that comes over as hard sell, even though you don't mean it. So just throttle back on the over enthusiasm. You know, to start looking as they begin to look hunted. Remember, we're nurturing long-term relationships. It's farming, not hunting. You know, keep the thing going. It's okay to offer your business card, but I do it by saying, do you have a business card? And when they give me their business card, it's natural for me to offer mine, as opposed to have my business card. This is a great way as well. People say to me, okay, now we've got into it, how do I get out of it? Well, actually, this is a natural way of finishing. You know, oh, do you have the business card? And it sort of signals that it's the end of the conversation. And the other thing is, when I get back to the office, is it okay if we connect on LinkedIn? You ask them. So that's a great way of finishing as well. If you haven't finished, but there's still other people to meet, suggest you're going to meet them for a one-to-one meeting. It's harder these days since it's a virtual coffee rather than a real one, but you never know. Go and have a coffee together. Book on Zoom is easy, of course, traveling. If all else fails and you need to move on, just say so. There's nice ways of doing it. It's good to talk to you. Thank you. Now, I mustn't monopolize your time. There must be others here you want to meet. One of my friends says he goes and has a cup of coffee. He says, I must just refill my coffee, and heads off to So we all have our ways of doing it. This person, the other thing that you can do to help this person get on to talk to someone, particularly if they're really scared, is introduce them to someone else. You drive a limousine for weddings. Come over here. I know a celebrant. I'm going to introduce you to the celebrant. If they may be able to pass your card to people, and now you've passed them on to someone else, and you can go and talk to somebody. Again, it's back to the warm but not effusive. You need to mean it. And then we come to the last bit of the advice I would give to them, which is following up. And I'm going to start with some basics. Well, I wouldn't I? I am the business plumber. If you have any meetings, let's get a one-to-one together, whatever, or we'll get together after such and such a meeting. Put it in your diary now. The meeting isn't over until you've done your actions. There's no good assuming you're going to remember, because things will come at you from all directions. Put it in your diary now. Put it in your diary at the time if necessary. Were there any actions you promised? Oh, I'll send you that article. Oh, I'll remember to put you in touch with someone. Oh, I'll send you the information about the Stow Chamber meetings, whatever. What actions? Schedule the ones that you're going to have to do in the future. And if you can do some actions now, that's great. If the only action you could do now is to say, thanks very much for meeting. I haven't forgotten about this, but I've had to contact, Sean for some information, and I'll come back to you. I'll pursue it and get back to you as soon as he responds. It just tells them you were listening. Hey, this is a good person. This is a reliable person. And commercially, that's very important, because people need reliable suppliers. So you're coming over as reliable. One of the actions you can do is connect with somebody on social media. People expect to be stalked on social media. You just do it very nicely. You drop them a note. Is it okay to connect? If you can, on LinkedIn, don't just connect. We met today and I'd like to connect. On Facebook, it's not quite so easy, but you can connect with people. And finally, if you have a database and you've got any notes, put them in the database now. Don't expect to remember that they were going in for an operation next week, because by the time you come to next week and you're chasing them and wondering why they haven't responded, your notes will tell you that they were going in for an operation. Right, and you go back with a totally different sort of thing. Like, how are you getting on with your operation? Drop me a note when you're ready. So I've tried to go through all the basics of networking, but I'm sure everybody has got lots of questions about getting the best out of networking. And I'd be really, really pleased if somebody were to ask a question.
Right. Thanks very much indeed. I think Kim has the first question. So, and I have several other people lined up.
Mine was a question and an observation, really. I mean, because I describe social media as networking online. But interestingly, while you were talking about Hubert, who's the social person, people forget about the social bit when they get onto social media. And I'm just going to make the comment that please don't.
It is
called social media. But there is an opportunity to do business as well.
Yeah.
And when the easiest
I have done.
Facebook is also through groups for people to know.
Okay, that's great. Mr. Sollart, I believe you were next. Need to unmute yourself, my friend.
Right. A couple of things. One, to me, the thing about networking that's so vital is listen. That's the one. I've been to quite a few networking things where folk are just on transmit, you know, and you can't, exactly, you just can't seem to get a word in. So listen's the key thing. The second thing too is put your phone on airplane mode, not silent, airplane, because you get distracted even if it vibrates in your pocket. Worse still, of course, is if somebody then picks up a call while you're talking to them. So they're the two things I've sort of learned, you know, through my time in networking.
Good point.
Very good advice. Okay, Sean, I think you were next. If you'd like to unmute.
Hi. Yeah. As you know, Kate, because I operate fairly niche, I only work with underwater basket weavers. Now, I never find them in any networking groups I go to. So how do you think I need to adapt in what I deliver to get to the underwater basket weavers?
I think you need to have a story about how you helped an underwater basket weaver, and then say to the people you meet, do you know any underwater basket weavers? I think that you're not alone in this. There are an awful lot of people who are selling to the high street, and you very rarely get the high street turning up at networking because they normally got the shops open. So when you are networking, even when it's absolutely focused on commercial, it's not the people in the room, it's who they know. It's all the people behind them that you can't reach, and they're the gatekeeper, and you want them to open the gate. So telling a story, I mean, this is why I think Alan's thing about scripting was such a valuable session to run, because it's about telling your story and how did you help them. And I think you've got a lot of stories of how you helped somebody. You just need a bit of help creating that story. And if you are doing underwater basket weavers, it is really clear that to say so. Don't just say anybody. I networked for a long time with a lady who did cleaning, and I've been networking with her for about 2.5 years before I discovered it was only office cleaning. And so I recommended to several people to contact her, and it was a complete waste of time because she never actually said office cleans.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, get the niche right. Absolutely right. Catherine, I think you had an observation.
Yeah, it was a sort of slightly sideways move, really. All the things that you've said about not expecting instant commercial success on your first networking meeting. I would advise Evadne and Hubert to perhaps tell their nearest and dearest and their closest friends who are really excited for them to be going to networking meetings, not to ask as soon as they get back, did you make any business? it's you know, did you get a job?
yeah.
Got any work out of it? It doesn't actually help, because the answer will be no for quite some time, possibly. And unless they know, you know, we know this now, but unless, you know, they want to be supportive to you, but if they don't know how the system works, they might need a gentle nudge.
I think that's a very good point.
Be supportive, but that's not the right question.
Yeah, Evadne's got to control her boss. But that's exactly what her boss will say. Yeah. Good point.
Very true. Okay. Any more questions? I don't have any more on my list.
I think Colin had one.
Yeah, you mentioned some things when you're in a scenario where there's a group of people chatting and you've kind of come in. You mentioned a couple of ideas. Have you got any further top tips for how you kind of join a conversation and kind of, I guess, build that confidence up in yourself when you're first going into that conversation?
Well, I think you sort of drift around and you wait for an opening. There are some people, when they have a conversation, they're face to face like this, and you know that they don't want anybody to join them. But if they're sort of standing like that, then there's a room for a third person to join, and you can just, particularly if it's a bit where over a coffee, you just drift in and you wait for a moment, but you join in the conversation they're having, not. And let me tell you about myself, which which I've seen done and I wouldn't actually recommend. If you're at a networking meeting and everybody knows you're networking, walk up to somebody and, you know, if things go quiet, and say, you know, so how are you doing? You know, just walk up to anybody. I know when you were that high, you were told not to talk to strangers, but it's different now.
Absolutely. Can I just actually mirror that bit of the very good bit of advice? I think if you are in a meeting where you know most people, perhaps you're the regular attender or perhaps one of the team, and you're in conversation, bear in mind that there are people there who are exactly in that situation, who are nervous, perhaps not sure how to approach you, and think about where you're standing and how you're looking. Because you can have a conversation perhaps with someone else on the team at that moment, but you can still be, as you described it, Kate, you can be open, you can leave a space for someone to nudge in. And, you know, even if possibly if they're looking a bit hesitant, glance in their direction, you know, give them, you know, or invite them to come and join you. You
Smile.
know, you can,
Smile.
exactly. I mean, you can help people who are nervous, as you were describing earlier on, but in that way, especially when you're in a group, because a group is a little bit frightening to a newcomer.
I think both Kim and Stephen had something to say. Kim?
Yeah, mine was just a quickie that I actually found the one-to-ones afterwards were almost more valuable than the networking, because that's when you really get to understand what someone does. And
Absolutely.
to talk about who you know that you might be able to introduce them to, and you develop a much deeper understanding of what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's the same kind of rules. You're asking about them. You're not trying to shove your whatever you're doing down their throat.
Yes.
So,
yeah, and of course with good marketing, they want to know about you. Steve?
Yeah, absolutely. Steve.
I think what Alan, you just said earlier on is, you know, when you are in a bit of a huddle with a bunch of other people, is to always have that eye out, just to leave that gap open. Because, you know, if you have got somebody that's unfamiliar with the whole thing about networking, it's understandable they could be a bit of a shrinking violet kind of thing. So always have that sense of, oh, you're welcome. So if you've got that gap there, then they can well, just drag them in by the collar if necessary, but yeah, right, and just sort of make sure they know that they're welcome. They don't have to feel nervous in amongst us, because actually that's one reason why I really like the Stowe Chamber. The Stowe Chamber, I think, probably has to be one of the most friendliest networking things I've been to, and I've been to quite a few. And some of them are really friendly, but there are an awful lot of people that go to it, so it's actually a bit difficult sometimes, you know. In a networking group where there are lots of people, it's more difficult sometimes to join in than it is for one that's a bit smaller. So I think, yeah, as you said, Alan, leave an opening, let people see that, yes, there's room for me to stand there.
What I used to say when I was training, because I was a member of BNI for many years, and they do some fantastic training, and what I used to say was to people is, remember the V for visitor. So you not standing like that, you're standing like that. And just remember that there's always room for a third person.
Cool.
Right, I'm very conscious of the time.
I think time is now, yeah, it's just gone 10:15. So,
but you know, if somebody's, I understand if people have to dash out, but if anybody wants any more questions, I'm here for you.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, just a quick word to say thank you, as always, to Kate for a very, very good presentation. She knows whereof she speaks, and I think we've all got something out of it, including people who've been networking for a long time. So many, many thanks, Kate. Great talk. Thank you.